Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers of happiness, joy, and a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation, and we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Melissa, you gotta make sure that you don't say anything dumb on our podcast today.
Just today?
Well, just in general.
Oh, really?
Because you might get canceled.
Oh, that.
Because we have such a huge following and they'll wield their power. You've been wanting to talk about cancel culture
Yes,
for a while.
I have, for sure. I think it's a thing, and I think it's growing in all these weird pockets of our lives.
Mm-hmm. So, I've known about the cancel culture stuff a little bit, but I haven't really been paying a ton of attention. So why don't you explain to me what you think this cancel culture thing is?
Oh, I know this is a test because I know you've checked all this out. No, but the reason,
Test.
it's a test. I'm gonna fail it. The reason I brought it up is, and I'm probably gonna be a little, I'll probably annoy people. I'll probably get canceled actually after my
Yeah, see,
comments.
that's what I'm telling you. Watch yourself.
So I've never been a Kardashian fan at all, right? I don't usually follow along too tightly with pop culture. But lately, Kanye West has been crazy town in the news and in social media posts, blasting his ex-wife and her current boyfriend. Okay. So now it's.
Oh, I see. This is how up on it I am. I thought they were still married.
Oh, see, now you're going to get canceled. That's it. How can you be so out of touch?
How could I not know such basic,
Yeah. Human
like-
fundamental information
yeah, right.
that you must
Yeah.
have to survive. So I don't normally get wrapped into any of this, but I found it kind of fascinating because he has amped up to the point where he's actually posting violent things, right? So it's not good at all. And he has all of these big award ceremonies coming up that he's supposed to be performing in, and systematically one by one they're canceling him. Okay, so they're canceling him, and I'll just keep my own personal opinions aside because it doesn't really matter. I don't know these people, right? However, this idea of cancel culture, I think, is growing significantly and in politics and in pop culture and stuff like that. And the way that I term it in Melissa phrases, you say or do something that's unpopular, no matter how great you are, suddenly everyone turns against you. And it just, it's over. It's over for you. If you're a popular person or someone who has, sponsorships or endorsements, suddenly they start disappearing. You're seeing a lot of instant, huge feedback by being canceled for doing something that's not of this social norm or what people deem as what you should do.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about cancel culture and what you described right there is, and I think maybe even some more of the roots of cancel culture, when it started, it's kind of like a form of activism.
Tell me
Right,
about that. Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm a marginalized group of people, right? Or I don't have a voice, right? I don't have a platform,
You
and
don't have a platform. Yeah. Yep.
and the only way for me to kind of speak up against things that I don't think are right, is this, I'm going to purposely ignore it, or I'm going to not participate in the thing that you're saying or doing, right? So could there be a part of cancel culture that is around, fundamentally an activism kind of thing to say hey, I don't think that behavior is okay.
Oh, for
and
sure.
we're gonna like all us little people who don't really have a voice against the media, against movie stars, against like ultra famous people who have huge platforms,
Yeah.
the way we're going to activate against that is by not participating in your brand, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In your movie star brand,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not gonna go see your movies. We're not gonna
Yeah.
go to your shows. We're not gonna go participate in your things.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a continuum on this, right?
Hmm.
And I think that what you just described to me sounds pretty healthy.
It's like an accountability thing.
Yeah.
I think it's
Mm-hmm.
um like if you want to abuse your power,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're in a person who's in a position of kind of great power or influence, and you're going to abuse that, that's a way to stand up against it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So did you do a little research besides this?
Of course, I did a little research.
Oh, good. I love it. I did not. I just had a wild emotional response
Well,
to something and thought, oh, what a good conversation.
well, okay. So just like a little bit of me being like, um, in some of my like hippie roots
Hmm.
is, like I was very active in public access
Oh, yeah.
as a young person, right?
You better
Like,
tell people what public access is.
yeah, so
It's
yeah, like
not it's not
none
on
of
a
the young,
lake.
it's literally, yeah. uh, the way I participated was uh mostly looked a lot like Wayne's World.
Oh my gosh.
We did have a late night call-in show. Um,
You did?
yeah, it was called Why Are You Up?
Oh.
And people would call in. They'd mostly try to just swear on air, but like we'd have bands in and it's awesome. It's like at
Oh
1 a.m. in Bloomington, Minnesota.
oh my God. How did I never know
We've never
this?
talked about that?
Oh my God.
Uh,
That is so funny. Did you have long hair?
oh yeah, I'm sure I had hockey hair at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so anyway, public access, for those who don't know,
Sorry, you
was
totally
like
derailed me. I'm gonna need a minute.
it kind of started in the 70s. It started in the 70s, was really pretty popular throughout the 80s, and kind of started dwindling through the 90s, and today is kind of a much smaller
Mm-hmm.
thing. But the basis of it was that news media had all the power,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
They had the biggest voice, they had the biggest megaphone,
The biggest
and
money, the biggest
the biggest
everything.
man. They were controlling the message to all of the citizens of the United States, right?
Yeah.
So there was a handful of media companies, and they
Mm-hmm.
had all of the power to shape the story.
Right.
Well, a, a backlash to that was this rise of public access. And remember, this was in the days before you could just like
Yeah.
shoot a YouTube video on your
Yeah.
phone and upload it for the world to see, right?
Right. There
You
were
got
no
to
phones.
understand there's no distribution at that point. So,
Right.
um, so there's all these little TV stations all over the country, mostly based around your city or your county. And you could go there, you could use the equipment, you could create any TV show you wanted and get it on air, right? So this is where like some of the things like Zach Galifianakis's like Between Two Ferns.
Yes.
If you've ever seen that, that's
Yes,
like
I
a
have.
spoof of a public access show. Obviously, Wayne's World was a spoof of a public access show. But in any case,
Obviously. Yeah,
the whole roots.
I just want
Yeah.
to say that was not obviously. I did not realize that.
Oh,
Like,
seriously?
no,
Oh,
no.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. You're in a good
Um,
flow. Sorry to disrupt.
so the whole basis of all of that stuff was get a platform for peoples whose voices, aren't heard or can't be heard or are too small to be heard, right?
Yeah.
So some of this activism around free speech,
Mm,
right? And giving people who otherwise don't have a voice,
mm-hmm.
um, I think is important.
I do too.
Like, I
Yeah.
think it's important to make sure that people are heard. Now, the question I was having um was, is cancel culture, it's like a form of this activism, but is it going too
Too
far?
far.
Is it actually becoming like a
Mhm.
weapon? Are people weaponizing
Mhm.
this cancel culture idea to like further kind of like their own political agendas
Yep.
and they're actually kind of like it's almost like going the opposite way
Right.
than it was intended.
Okay. I really like this idea because that does give a lot more credence to it that I had never even thought of, like the beginning of it and the
Hmm.
activism part of it. Because if you use that line of thinking, that makes sense because today everything is amped up. We keep talking about that. Every single thing, people are more emotional.
Hmm.
People are more willing to act on their emotions, whether they should or should not. People are more upset. There's a lot more depression, a lot more anxiety. And so when somebody does something that is not popular, um, it's almost like there's this massive backlash. It's like it goes
Hmm.
beyond standing up for your rights. It goes beyond providing a counterbalance.
Yeah.
It just straight up obliviates the person.
Yeah, and there's a bit of with this particular flavor,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Um, there seems to be a bit of this like kind of mob
Yeah,
mentality, right?
yep,
It's like, oh, there's like another one. Let's go all pile on together,
right,
right? Now,
right.
the question I would have is like, are all of those individuals making the decision that 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 what they're what the current cancel culture, like what the current popular target is,
Mhm,
right?
yeah,
Is that really a thing that they individually are wanting to fight for, or are they just kind of like
yeah,
hopping on the pile, right?
because they wanna
Because it's
they just wanna get rid of some of the feelings and emotions that they've had building up, and that feels like a really
yeah,
good
it's like an
target.
outlet for them, and it might as well, right? It's kind of feels good to lash out.
Yeah. It's super interesting to think about that because like I'm talking about, the Kardashians, which is hilarious. Honestly, I think that's very funny. Um, but if you think about it in politics, if somebody says the wrong words or uses the
Hmm.
wrong description to talk about a group, that person is just instantly taken down, not just in politics. We're also seeing it in news platforms or um, sports
Hmm.
commentators, anybody who is doing their
Yeah,
role and makes a mistake,
yeah.
like
Oh,
legitimately makes a mistake.
there's that big one with Joe Rogan and Spotify,
Yes.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And that's like, and that's all edging into
Yeah.
uh, Spotify as a business has to make choices around
Mm-hmm.
the artists on their platform based
Mm-hmm.
on what those artists are saying.
And what all the other artists on the platform are also saying. They're getting a ton of pressure. I don't know what's happened with
Yeah.
that recently. I stopped following it kind of, but yeah, it's really interesting. And look at the responsibility of the social media platforms. Look at
Yep.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you know,
Oh, from a social media platform perspective, all this piling on
mhm,
and mob mentality, that's good for business.
exactly.
I mean, it seriously is.
Exactly.
It gets people more hooked on the platform. It creates much more like attention
Mhm,
on their platform. It's you know, but is that a good thing for society? It might be good for
right,
that particular business, but
right.
is it good for society?
Right, and so much of how society is connected is using those platforms, and so they have so much
Yep.
power, right?
So you said an interesting thing I want to like come back to is that is is around people being scared uh or people making mistakes
Mhm.
and then not, then they just have to like kind of live with these instant consequences
Yeah, there
of
isn't
it,
yeah,
right?
the timing of it is an interesting piece too, yeah.
And um people make mistakes. right?
Yeah.
People say dumb things all the time. Um,
I know I do.
are we are we losing like empathy, right? Like, where's
Yeah.
the empathy in this whole thing? Where's
Hmm.
like the giving people grace in this whole thing?
Right. And right. And it is such a fine line. Who makes these decisions? It's like if
Hmm.
somebody is behaving really poorly and their intention is not pure and they do things that are terrible and there's an instant cancel culture around them, then it feels like that's an easier one to that's an easier one to say, well, you kind of had it coming, like
Mm-hmm.
karma's real.
Yeah.
Whatever you think, say, and do comes back to you 100,000 times.
Yeah.
Um, but there are so many people that are not intentionally trying to be hurtful. They just made a
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
And how do we differentiate between those two things as a people, not as an
Mm.
individual, but as a people?
Mm-hmm.
How do we take our foot off the gas of instant, I don't know, instant
Well,
reaction?
here's a thing I was wondering is like, like as I observe, I like to kind of observe like general things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then
Mm-hmm.
think about how like it affects the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, me
So
too.
what I was wondering is if we have a strong sort of uprising in this cancel culture and this idea that if you say the wrong thing, you're going to be outcast, right, from society and you'll be ruined and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how is that affecting our young people, right? Like you are right. There are a handful of bad actors in our society that are doing bad things.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you know, it
Mm-hmm.
might be fine to
Yeah.
outcast them from society like we're
Yeah.
doing. Now, I would say that that is a very small number of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very small number of bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
But if you tilt too hard on some of these concepts and it starts overflowing into like everyday life,
Right.
right? Like if I were to hear my kids talking about someone at school and like canceling someone at school, that would be like, ooh, that's a really dangerous
Damaging.
concept to be playing with because you're going to have a whole generation of people who are scared to actually share their true thoughts and feelings for fear of being outcast or repercussions of sharing that.
Yep. 100% agree. And unfortunately, the handful that you talk about that are the bad eggs, as my grandma used to
Yeah.
say, um, they are informing so much because of their large social media platforms. That's the
Yep.
thing. How do we stay present towards that? Because I mean, I'm still on social media. I'm 55. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Not much. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter occasionally. Um, but I kind of get bored of it.
Hmm.
I don't really spend much time on it because I think it's like I think of it like a little bit of an alternative universe.
Mm.
Like my true identity isn't tied to that, so
Hmm.
I'm not posting my breakfast.
We could do a whole nother podcast
I
on
know, I
social
know.
media.
But I'm also of the age where I don't need that kind of validation, or I don't perceive that as my validation or my connection to the world.
Hmm. Yep.
However, I've got kids in their 20s, high school kids that I know of,
Hmm.
other kids. They don't have the same broad view of how to be okay with themselves regardless, and recognizing that these platforms are simply that.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is something to be thinking about, right? Because
Yep.
it is got to be really, really scary.
Yeah. And I remember, oh, remember when we had Ben
Yeah.
Lamprom
Mm-hmm.
on the pod? And he said something that has just really stuck with me is that um social media
Mm-hmm.
is creating like less diversity, like less
Oh yeah.
broadness in thinking, and it's narrowing thinking. So you have like millions or tens of millions or billion people that are all thinking
Yeah.
very similarly because they're like seeing the same stories
Mm-hmm.
and hearing the same sort of like stream of information.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I think about even like cancel culture, I think of like that stuff, right? Like some people have such huge platforms and they're kind of like informing what
Yeah.
so many people think.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people know how to do that really, really well.
Hmm.
Maybe the
Yeah.
people that shouldn't
Yeah.
know how to do that really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I don't know where this stops. Like I don't know when is society going to become tired of this, like they do
Hmm.
everything like everybody does everything else. Is that going to become something that we suddenly say, oh, we're all doing this and we need to stop? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
sure.
right. Well, I hope that that some of the roots of this around like activism
Mm-hmm.
and giving people, marginalized groups a voice and a little bit of a power to change the power imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
I hope
Yeah.
some of that and some of the bad actors, do um kind of get exposed.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of good that can happen, but I think there's a lot more unintended side effects
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
than we're aware of, right?
Yeah.
So having everybody who's listening just to think about this topic
Mm-hmm.
themselves and kind of be aware of how some of these cultural waves that go through our society
Yeah.
have unintended impacts on especially young people.
I really like that idea because, and I've always said it to my kids too. It's like with texting or, what my grandmother used to say, if it's written down, if you send it, once it's in writing, you cannot take it back,
Hmm.
and if you get mad because you see something, you see a public figure that said or done something that you don't approve of, people can hide behind the keyboard and they can say really, really mean things
Hmm.
and they can behave very poorly, thinking that there really there's no ramification to that, right? There is no consequence. You can do whatever
Yeah.
you want. But that isn't actually true because it does throw out, it's an energetic thing. And once it's in writing, you can't take it back. And a lot of people see it that you don't even think might see it.
Hmm.
Future employers, other family members, younger kids. Yeah, it's really an
Yeah.
interesting thing to think about how
And
you
you're even kind of saying
participate.
that in the context of like just jumping on the bandwagon. Like be
Yes.
careful of which bandwagons you jump on.
Yeah. And if you need to jump on a bandwagon, it's like be
Yeah, think
thoughtful.
about why. Like, why do you want to participate in that? What's
Yeah.
like where really get to the root of it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I just think it's an interesting topic today. And I think that there's a lot of energy building around this. And it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds as
Hmm.
time goes on. I just have one other question.
Yeah.
So the show that you had,
Yes.
Why Are You Up?
Why are
That
you
is a
up?
total
Yeah.
JJ. That is a total
It's
JJ title. I just am curious. Did you have a plant or what did your set look like? I
Um,
need the full
I don't
visual.
I don't know that we worked much on the set. Like it was in the studio, so there's just like some random, like fake painted brick wall behind us. A couple of chairs, a little telephone in the middle.
So it's like the Saturday Night Live skit with the public
Yeah,
radio. Oh,
there's a lot like that. Yeah.
okay. Thanks for the finish.
I'll try to find some old tapes. Maybe I can find some old tapes
Oh
for
my
you.
God, I'll give you $10 if you can find one. Honest to God, I will pay you money.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well. Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them.
We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring.